What's hiding under Dulce, New Mexico? Havelpix Horror presents The Hatch Beneath the Mesa. My friend Luke isn't the type to get rattled easily. He's the adventurous one in our group, always taking risks, always chasing that next thrill. When he told me the story, though, I saw a different side of him. Something in his eyes, in his voice. Whatever happened up there on Archuleta Mesa changed him. It started as a regular hiking trip, just a weekend getaway with his girlfriend Maria and two of their close friends, Ethan and Jess. They were looking for a break from life, some peace, somewhere remote where they could camp, hike, and leave the world behind for a while. Dulce seemed like the perfect place, a small town in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by miles of desert. Of course, they'd heard the rumors, everyone had. Dulce has this strange reputation, a hotspot for UFO sightings, stories about underground bases, government experiments, all the usual conspiracy fodder. But they didn't think much of it. They weren't out there for that. They just wanted an escape. When they arrived in Dulce early that morning, the town was quiet, almost too quiet. Luke told me it felt like a place where time had stopped. Just a few small buildings, a lonely gas station, a diner that looked like it hadn't changed in 50 years. They picked up some last-minute supplies and headed out to Archuleta Mesa, where they planned to spend the next 2 days camping under the stars. By the time they reached the mesa, the sun was high, the desert stretching out in every direction. Luke said it was beautiful in a way, the kind of isolation that makes you feel like you're the last people on Earth. But Maria, she was uneasy. Luke told me she had a way of sensing things before anyone else did, and that day, she kept glancing around, like something about the place felt off. Ethan and Jess didn't notice. They were laughing, enjoying the hike, oblivious to the tension that was building around them. And honestly, Luke brushed it off too. They'd made it to the summit of the mesa by mid-afternoon, set up camp, and were settling in when Luke spotted something strange. Tucked behind a cluster of large boulders was a steel door, half buried in the earth, rusted around the edges, but still intact. Luke said it looked like it had been there for decades, maybe longer. "What the hell is that doing up here?" Ethan had asked. They all walked over to it, Maria hanging back a little, and Jess squinting at the faded emblem on the metal. Luke didn't recognize the symbol. None of them did. It was some kind of official-looking mark, maybe military, maybe government, but it was worn down so much that it was hard to make out. Now, you'd think, in a situation like that, most people would know better than to mess with something like that. An old rusted door in the middle of nowhere, locked tight, looking like it was meant to stay that way. But not Luke. He's the kind of guy who runs toward mystery, not away from it. And so, before anyone could stop him, he started banging away at the rusty padlock with a rock he'd found nearby. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" Maria had asked. Luke said she had this edge in her voice, a gut feeling that told her something wasn't right. But Luke being Luke, he just grinned. "What's the worst that could happen?" He joked. It took a bit of work, but eventually, the padlock snapped open with a sharp, metallic clang. The door creaked as Luke pulled it open, revealing a dark, steep tunnel leading straight down into the earth. A rush of cold, stale air came up from below, carrying with it the scent of damp metal, rust, and something else, something foul. That was the moment Maria really wanted to turn back. She was certain something wasn't right. But Ethan, Jess, and Luke were already descending the ladder into the tunnel, their flashlights cutting thin beams into the darkness. Maria didn't want to be left alone on the surface, so she followed them down, reluctantly. Luke described the tunnel as narrow, with damp concrete walls and wires running along the ceiling, some still intact, others frayed and hanging loose. The deeper they went, the colder it became, as if the ground itself was swallowing them whole. None of them spoke much. Luke said he didn't realize it then, but looking back, they were all on edge. It was that feeling you get when you know something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. The tunnel opened up into a large underground chamber, dimly lit by flickering, ancient fluorescent lights. The room was filled with strange, rusted equipment, metal tables, machines that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. Dust covered everything, and yet, There was still a hum in the air, a faint electrical buzz, like something was still alive down there. Jess was the first to speak. "What the hell is this place?" No one answered her. Luke said he was too busy looking at the machines, half disassembled, some of them still blinking faintly with power. It looked military, definitely, but old. Cold War era, maybe. Ethan wandered over to a table, brushing dust off a stack of papers. He said the writing was mostly in English, but some of it wasn't. Strange symbols, diagrams of things that didn't make sense, bodies, hybrid creatures. But it was Maria who had wandered toward the back of the chamber, who found the glass containers. There were 3 of them, large cylindrical vats, each filled with a thick yellowish fluid. And inside those vats were things. At first, she thought they were mannequins, but as her flashlight beam passed over them, she realized they were far too detailed for that. They looked human, mostly, but their features were twisted, grotesque. Some had scales, others had limbs that didn't make sense, and their eyes were open, staring straight ahead, like they'd been frozen in time. "What the hell were they doing here?" Maria had whispered, but no one answered her. Luke told me that's when he felt it too. The sensation that they were being watched, like the air in the room had shifted, like something was aware of their presence. And then there was a noise. A sharp metallic clang echoed from somewhere behind them. The far wall of the chamber had a door, an old, heavy, steel one, and it had slid open on its own, revealing a hallway bathed in red light. Ethan was the first to react. Did anyone touch anything? Everyone shook their heads. Luke said that's when the adrenaline kicked in, that primal fear, that instinct that told them to leave. He grabbed Maria's hand and turned toward the exit, but before they could reach the tunnel, the lights flickered, just for a second. When they came back on, one of the vats was empty, and standing in the doorway was the creature that had been inside. Luke said it looked human, or maybe it had been once, but its skin was pale and translucent, and its limbs twitched unnaturally, as if it was struggling to control its own body. Its mouth, a thin, ragged slit, opened slowly, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. And then, it moved. Luke didn't even have to tell me what happened next. I could see it on his face. They ran. They ran faster than they ever had in their lives. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, but that thing, it was following them. Close. Its claws scraping against the concrete, its breath ragged, unnatural. They made it out, barely. They slammed the hatch shut behind them, but here's the thing. Luke told me that hatch didn't lock from the outside. They left Dulce that night, packed up their camp, and drove until they were miles away from that mesa. And Luke, for all his curiosity, for all his thrill-seeking, he told me one thing I'll never forget. "Don't ever go near Archuleta Mesa," he said. "There's something buried beneath that ground, and it's not meant for us." This has been what lurks beneath Dulce, New Mexico. I'm Timothy, and if you enjoyed this story of strange lights, hidden hatches, and the secrets buried under Archuleta Mesa, don't forget to hit that like button. If you have your own theories or chilling tales, share them in the comments below. And for more spine-chilling stories, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. Thanks for watching, and remember, not all doors are meant to be opened.